Hey there, it's Dylan from EatWild, and in this episode we're going to show you guys how to hang a deer up from a meat pole and get it, skin it out and get it ready to take to the butcher. We got a great meat pole here. It's super sturdy and it's ready to go for us, which is great. We're at our hunting camp. So what I've done here is I've just backed the truck so that the deer is basically right underneath the meat pole, because we're eventually going to lift this deer up onto the meat pole. A lot of times if you can't actually back the truck right up to the meat pole, you'll slide the deer underneath the meat pole. Same process applies as how we're going to hang it up. One thing I'd always encourage you to do is have a tarp down either in the truck or on the ground so that you can start out by keeping your deer clean, and throughout this whole process we're going to make sure that we keep as much hair and dirt off this animal, so when we take it into the butcher we got an excellent example of a nice clean animal, and that'll go a long way with our butcher. Okay, so the first thing I do to get started here is I've got him laying out here. Now we're going to hang him up from his legs, like his legs are going to be up, and we're going to start skinning down from there. So with his head this way, I just need to spin him around so I can start, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start skinning him from his legs down before I hang him up in the tree, because I want to get access to these haunches here where I'm going to basically hang him from. I'm always cutting, when I'm skinning an animal, I'm always cutting from the inside out. So what I'm trying to do is avoid, I'm going to try to avoid cutting hair. If I cut this way, I'm going to cut a bunch of hair, and it's going to free up a bunch more hair to wind up eventually on the meat. And so you see I worked my way down a little ways here, and you can see this is his leg bone here, and then there's this tendon back here. This tendon is super tough. So where I usually either tie a rope through here, or in this case we're going to run a stick through here and tie a rope to the stick, but it's a really tough part of the deer. So just make sure you don't cut that when you're skinning them out. Okay, so the next thing I do, once I got the skin back, I'm going to find a good sturdy stick, and there's lots of sticks laying around here, and I'm going to run it through between the leg and that tendon there. Run it right through. You want a stick that's a couple of feet anyways. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tie a piece of rope to it. That eventually is going to be the rope that holds them up. And I'm just going to do a clove hitch here. Put one lock on there. That should do it. Okay, then this rope goes up and over the meat pole. All right, so we're going to take advantage of this pulley to haul the deer up onto this meat pole. You could always just run the rope right up and over top, and then you could pull the deer up like this. But if you got a couple guys, you can have one guy pull on the rope, the other guy lifting the deer. But because we happen to be at a hunting camp where we got a pulley, we're going to take advantage of a little bit of technology to do this. Okay. A couple ways we can get this guy hung up. If we've got a couple guys, like I said, you can haul him up. One guy hauling the rope, the other guy lifting him up. Because I'm solo here, I'm going to try the truck method, and that might mean we might have a little disaster, but I'm sure it'll all work out fine. So we'll see how it goes. One of the things that's kind of nice about using this truck method is you can adjust the height, especially with the pulley. So you saw there I brought it right up to the top when we first brought him up, but I just dropped him down a bit because I want to work on him from here down to here, and then once I get past his mid-level here, I'll probably haul him up a little bit more so I'm not hunched over and trying to skin him way down here. So we'll see how it goes. The one thing I'm going to try and do the whole time is I want to make sure that I skin from the top down, and the reason why I do that is because every time you cut the skin a little bit, some hair frees up, and that gravity is going to pull that hair down. And with sticky meat, the meat's going to be a little bit sticky when you get it up, it's just going to attract all that hair. So what I'm going to make sure is that as I work my way down, there's clean meat above it and then hair and body below it. So as a general theory of how to skin out an animal, I go with the X method here. I'm going to run my knife up here, cutting away from the meat and through the hide and then out through the hair. I'm going to do that X here, and then I'm going to do the same X coming out on these arms. And then I'm just going to basically peel the hide back away from the animal, and like I said, from the top down. There's a couple other things we've got to keep in mind here, is that depending on where the regulations are where you're hunting, in British Columbia we need to leave evidence of sex and species. So evidence of sex can be a testicle or a piece of the penis. Evidence of species depending on the, for larger game animals like elk and moose, we need to leave a patch of hair, like a 6 centimeters patch of hair. I usually leave that right at the top here on the cuff. That's the first thing I leave so I don't forget to do it. And then for deer now in British Columbia, we have to leave a tail. So I'll show you how I deal with that once I get to the tail. All right, I'm gonna get started. And I have better knives for this, which I'm going to break out here. That's better. Okay. Now, because I'm back in camp, I've got access to my butchering kit here. So, got a couple of nicer, bigger knives that might make the job a little easier. So this is probably, right in here is probably one of the trickier parts, because you kind of got, for one thing, that you're not going on my principle of going from top down, you're working your way back up here. So what I'm actually looking for is this penis, and there it is right there. And once I find it, I'm gonna cut it. I want to keep it attached to the animal, and the rest of it I can take off now. I can get the balls and everything and work my way back and up and over. Okay, so you can see his penis is attached, and I'm starting to work his balls and the rest of his stuff off over the back here. So if you want to come right in here, we can kind of look at the concept of skinning. So I'll show you once you get through some of that technical stuff, you got to kind of work your way around, but once you start getting going and you're actually skinning them down, I'll show you what I do here. So I take a handful of hair and I kind of pull it away from the animal, and then you can see this this white tissue here, this connective tissue. I just touch it with the knife, and it usually kind of pulls away. Now I'm always trying to keep the blade from, I don't want to cut the animal. See, I cut them a little bit there. I want to kind of cut towards the hide as I'm going. And get a handful of it here and work your way down. Now I've got a couple knives to work with. This knife is really nice and sharp, and it's good for the little technical spots. But this knife has got a lot longer blade, so it's kind of nicer. I get a longer cut when I'm trying to skin. So around the rump here, it's there's a little less of that sort of soft connective tissue that we had over here, and it's almost like the skin is right on the fat, so you end up actually cutting. It's really hard to just cut the hide off here, so it's a little bit trickier. So sometimes you'll make a hole, but that's actually kind of good. You can stick your finger through it and it gives you something to pull on. So this is one of the trickier areas. Once you get kind of past the butt and the groin area, it goes a lot quicker. Now I'm going to come up on the tail here in a second, and it gets a little tricky around there, and then after that it should be pretty smooth sailing. So this guy's actually in really good shape. You can see he's got lots of fat. Lots of fat on him. So we're probably not going to eat that fat though. We'll probably have the butcher take it off, because particularly on a mule deer, that fat holds a lot of flavor, holds a lot of deery flavor, or what people often say, gamey flavor or whatever. So now I'm coming around the tail here. Now this is where I got to do something. Normally I would just cut the tail off here. So if you're in a state or province that they don't make you keep the tail on, I would just cut right through the bone here, which I think is much more sanitary. But in this case, we're in Canada now, or in BC now, we have to keep the tail on. So I have to skin around it and leave the tail out. And then I'm going to cover it up with plastic so that all the hair doesn't wind up on my nice clean meat. This deer is in great shape. Like I was saying, we got to leave the tail attached to the animal so that they can be identified. So this is a mule deer tail, but just because it's quite dirty and it's got a lot of hair on it, I'm just concerned about it falling on the meat. So just take a plastic bag over it. Just put a little electrician's tape on there just so it stays in place. Not the prettiest thing, but it does the job. One thing you can do is grab a handful of hide, and then you can actually just kind of push it down, and that'll skin it down a little ways. Now, this is a whole lot easier when it's warm. You can actually just pull the hide right off, or you can look at our truck method video where you just pull the whole hide off using the truck. But you can get a bit of a gainer just pushing it down as you go. So I'm getting down to where his shoulders are, and I have to do a little tricky work around here as well. The first cut I'm going to do is I'm just going to go right down the front of his brisket and cut the hide straight out. And I can just keep on going all the way down his neck here. And if you haven't already taken out the trachea, it's a good idea to get that out too. And then I'm going to go ahead and start peeling back. The other thing I might want to do right now is go ahead and get, so I was talking about there's a bit of an X. So I did the X down here and here. The other end of the X is going down his forearms and then tying in with this cut here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So slide the knife in underneath this hide and then pull up away from the meat. And then eventually I got to make a cut over to here. Now, inevitably you're going to leave the odd little piece of meat on here as you work your way down. You just do your best to kind of keep cutting towards the hide, and every once in a while you'll catch a little bit of that flank. That's okay though. Okay, so I'm going to get down here, and then I'm going to get right down into his armpit as far as I can get. And eventually I got to kind of match up these cuts somehow. So I'm gonna work my way up from underneath there, and there we go. So I can see what I'm doing now. Get the rest of his arm off here. Keep working down the outside here. That's definitely a bullet hole, dude. Very interesting. Lead. That was a little tiny piece of lead.
That just clicked?
Yeah.
So what's the deal?
I think it's going to be their bullet fragment. So that's where you got them.
Yeah.
And it just worked its way up here somehow. Okay.
Incredible, man.
Oh yeah, you were shooting those Sierra boat tails too. They're not the best bullets. Actually, I should have got you shooting the Noslers. I'd head for that gun. Lifting them up a little bit with the truck just to make it a little easier to work on. And I've got most of this technical stuff done here, so I can probably just try to push down here a little bit and get a bit of a gainer. You gotta be careful too as you're doing this. You got a really solid meat pole above you that's not gonna come collapsing on top of you. When you get down towards the neck again, you just don't have nearly as much as that tissue to work with. It's just a lot tougher. So you're gonna wind up taking a little bit of tiny little meat off as you go, but it's a little trickier. Eventually we're gonna get to the back of his head. We're right to his ear here. So we're done skinning out his body, and then so the next cut for me is I just try and find the last joint. If you put his head back and forth, you'll feel his head and the top of his neck, and then I just go ahead and I cut right down around that last joint. The front there as well. So one of the things you'll notice when you're trying to skin a deer out is it's going to want to move around a little bit. So it's always nice to have a buddy holding on to the deer to stabilize it. You could always just tie it off, and that way it'll just keep it from spinning every time you're working around on the deer. I'm going to try this here to see if I can get enough leverage on his head to give him a spin. There he goes. Couple spins. She goes. So you can just see that's the back of his skull there, and just cut all the meat around there. Easy, easy. Other than that, this animal's pretty much ready to go. I'm going to show you guys what I do next as far as bagging it up and putting a game bag on, so I'm going to hang it for a while. We'll show you next. Okay, so there's a couple things I do just near the end here before I put it in a game bag. I just go over the whole thing and brush off from the top down, brush off any dirt or hair. And I just use this little nail brush. It just seems to do the job for me. You can use paper towel. Damp paper towel sometimes helps pick up the hair. Now we did pretty good here. We got a little bit of hair here and there, but it's looking pretty great. The last thing I do is I go over and I take off anything that I'm not planning to eat, that I don't want to have come back to me from the butcher. So there's a big hunk of tallow here. I can go ahead and just pull that off. There's also this bloodshot meat, which is not going to be edible, so I can go ahead and cut that out now. You can take it to the butcher like this, and he'll cut it out for you, but he's going to charge you to do it. Basically, with most butchers I know, you pay for the weight that goes into the butcher, and so he's just going to cut it off for first thing, so you might as well do it yourself. So as you start pulling away the layers of the flank here, you'll see that there's blood that's been sort of pushed up in between the different muscle layers here. And you know, once that blood is saturated, it's really not going to be able to, or once that meat's saturated or the soft tissue is saturated, it's not really going to be table fare. So you just go ahead and cut it off. Now, if you've hit bone, you're going to find that this is actually quite good for the shot. It's very limited what the bloodshot is, but if you've hit the shoulder, you'll find the area is quite a bit larger, and you'll just got to cut away a little bit. So with some of this like belly flap, this tallow or this fat here, we can't do much with it, but there's little bits of pieces of meat in between. So depending on how finicky you want to be, you can kind of separate out that meat and put it in the grinder pile. So we can go ahead and do that, and we'll do that for the rest of this, but this end here, which is a bit dirty, we're just going to throw it away. Okay, so that's just a big piece of back fat that I've worked off in here. You know, some guys will say you got to remove all of this right away, particularly on older, stinky or mule deer buck that's coming into the rut. I like to leave a little bit on here because it does protect the meat. Because this guy's got to go a little ways yet before we get to the butcher. So I'll leave a little bit on so that the meat's not exposed. Like that's basically the end of your tenderloin or your loin chop here, or the top of your rump. So you want to keep that nice and clean and let the butcher do, you know, let it hang for a while, let the butcher deal with it. But I'll take a little bit more of this off. Hey, so now that we're all cleaned up and done here, this guy's ready to go to the butcher. Now, if we're gonna hang him out here for a few more days and continue to hunt, we gotta make sure we cover him up with game bags in order to keep you can see the flies and the wasps are on him, and there's also gonna be some birds around. You can actually see where some of the birds worked their way in and ate some of the fat out of the inside. So we'll get them covered up. So my mom sewed me up these deluxe full-size game deer bags, and how they work, they just one bag for one deer. Okay, so the really important thing we want to make sure is that there's no way for a fly to get in here. So I want to make sure I tuck my game bag right around everything, And then I'm actually just gonna take my electrician's tape and seal it up. All right, so anyways, that's a done deal. So no flies or nothing get on there. It should stay nice and clean for when we're hanging it here. It's also great for transporting the animal. It's in a bag. This bag will allow it to breathe as opposed to plastic, which won't allow it to breathe. So this guy's good here. The temperature is about 6 degrees here. It's getting down to 0 overnight. So we're really comfortable. I'm comfortable hanging this deer for 5 days if we want, 5, 6, 10 days, as long as those temperatures stay below 6 degrees. I'm super comfortable. But yeah, great stuff. Anyways, great work by Alex, making on a great hunt and a great shot. And I hope you guys learned something today. You guys can check out more of our videos on our YouTube channel. Come hang out with us for a workshop, or you can download our app and you can get access to these videos while you're in the field and hunting. All right, we'll see you next time on Eat Wild.